Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And as you know, a couple of months ago I had Angelo Agrizzi here on my channel. We were talking about his book, Inside the Belly of the Beast, which has now been published. And of course, Angelo is now in hospital because of we're still yet to find out what actually happened while he spent a night in prison, but he's not in a good way. But someone very close to Angelo sent me this video, which is attached, and asked me to please let the world know what's happening. So I've attached it to this intro. And the things that I find very interesting is that the fellow who basically runs the CNA, the Central News Agency in South Africa, and anyone in South Africa knows how big CNA is, Benjamin Trisk is actually one of the people who's talking in the video that's attached here. And in the video they talk about just in the last few days how the prosecutors ambushed Angelo Agrizzi's legal team by opposing bail at the last moment when they said they would happily accept Angelo getting bail after his really poor condition in prison. And there's a lot more to come, guys. Believe me. Melinda Ferguson, who actually was involved in the book, is also in the video that's attached. And the thing that we will be unwrapping when we do get Angelo live here on the Loving Life channel is the ghost of Bosasa. Yeah, you think Bosasa is gone and finished and, you know, it's all over. Believe me, it's not. It's doing the same shit today as it did under Gavin Watson. And we will be unpacking that. This is huge. This is absolutely huge. You can understand why the ANC are so desperate to get rid of this guy. Now, what is really interesting in the video that's attached, right at the very start, they talk about how a News 24 fake news refused to cover Angelo Agrizzi's book, which basically exposes the corruption happening within the ANC. Think about it. News 24. Yep, you've seen them online. They are refusing to discuss this book, Inside the Belly of the Beast. And in the video attached, you'll see Angelo Agrizzi's young lawyer, Danny Witt, talking about a whole lot of things that are going to blow your socks off. I'm going to leave it at that. Please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Please like this video. Please share this video. And above all, please stay safe. And go Trump! Save the world! All right, guys. Take care. Bye for now.
Enough to be my son, but welcome here nevertheless. Danny is the attorney for Angelo Agrizzi, and he has been prominent recently as the bail conditions and the circumstances around those bail conditions have fluctuated. But Danny is a lawyer who is wise beyond his years to be doing the kind of work that he's doing. And I know that he's close to the Agrizzi family and will be able to answer most of the questions I think that you put around the book, Ferial. For myself, I just have a few things to say. And one of them is that publishers and booksellers should not take sides, but they need to be brave enough not to take sides. So it was enormously disappointing for me to see Media 24 and NB withdraw from the joint publishing venture that they had with Melinda Ferguson on this book. I'm a great admirer of Media 24's publishing, because I think that The President's Keepers, which was the first of this kind of book, was an incredibly brave publishing effort by NB. And I'm sorry that they forgot that tradition when they walked away from this book. I think it was unnecessary. And Melinda, you were phenomenal in adhering to your beliefs on this book and making sure it got published anyway. It was a treat to watch. So speaking for CNA, we will gladly sell this book, as we will gladly keep on selling The President's Keepers and Gangster State, and a new book which hasn't really yet come to the attention of many people, and that is Predator Politics, which details some of the more interesting activities of politicians who came out of Mpumalanga, some of whom have risen to far greater things in our national politics. I want to welcome everyone who's listening to this. We had to only announce this almost at the 11th hour because we didn't want to risk an interdict on the book. And so if there are fewer numbers than there should be, I think everybody will understand that there's been very little publicity around the book at this stage. I read the book in manuscript form at one stage. It's a terrific read, and I think it will just remind people of the huge mountain we have to climb to correct what has gone wrong in South Africa. I'm not going to hog any more of the limelight here. Ferial, you are free to talk to Danny. I'm going to go offline, but the audience should use the question button for questions, and we'll try and field them when we get to about 20 to 7. So please keep your questions coming, and I will review them and try and air as many of them as I can when we've got to the end of the interview. Please go ahead, Ferial.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, and congratulations on your purchase of CNA. I very much look forward to seeing what you're going to do with that chain after what you gave us at the Renewed Exclusive Books, a set of beautiful, beautiful stores. Melinda, congratulations on the publication of this book. I'm putting it a little bit closer to the camera so everybody can see it. It's called Inside the Belly of the Beast. It's the Angelo Agrizzi story, which Melinda published on her own eventually after NB Publishers pulled out of it. I can't see why. I think that it's a fantastic read. It's a gripping read. I've got every one of the state capture books which have been published on my bookshelf, and this one firmly deserves its place there. Why do I think so? For me, Angelo Agrizzi is a character like Dirk Coetzee or Eugene de Kock, who really, once they spoke out, once they made their voices clear, took us right inside the belly of the beast that was apartheid, its third force systems, its underworlds, its security forces. And Angelo Agrizzi has done the same thing about the story of state capture. Until he didn't come before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry early in 2019, nobody really, and we had all thought that this was just a story about the Gupta patronage network. In fact, his story about Bosasa really took us to the heart of state capture. It's an X-ray, and the book is the story of that X-ray. It tells us about the language of corruption. It tells us about words like the deal. It shows us the codes of how the bribes were paid. It teaches us what the terms like look after him and sort him out meant. And in that, I think it really does provide us with the means to say never again. So it's quite invaluable in understanding patterns of corruption, which was the nexus of the private and public sector tender systems by which our government purchases about 500 billion rand worth of goods and services every year. And this tells us how that story works. I'm very excited to have with us tonight the lawyer of Mr. Angelo Agrizzi, and that is Danny Witz. Very welcome, Danny. I thought that you might just first fill us in on how Angelo Agrizzi is doing, because he is, of course, still in hospital.
Thank you for having me on the webinar, and I'm glad and proud that I can speak for Angelo. As I mentioned to you guys, he went through a really rough patch. He was put back on a ventilator 2 days ago. His lungs aren't great at the moment and his kidneys aren't great, but I did manage to speak to him a few minutes ago while they were changing the ventilator. And as you can read from the words in the book and you can hear Angelo's voice, he's as strong as ever, and I have no doubt he will get through this despite the storm he's facing at the moment.
Thank you for bringing us right up to speed here. On Friday, he got bail, Friday afternoon, I think it was. What did you think of the first decision not to grant him bail? And how did the judges, what did they argue in granting that bail on Friday?
It was a crazy 2 weeks in my legal career. My father, Advocate Manny Witz, has been practicing in the speciality of criminal law for over 34 years. He said to me, every time you think you've seen it all, the state or something comes up and surprises you like you've just started your first day. And everything had been planned. We had negotiated with the state that they weren't going to oppose bail. We spoke with all the prosecutors. The magistrate was on brief in terms of it was just a simple bail application. Affidavits had been drafted. The state gave us no indication nor any documentation that they were opposing bail. Insofar as the morning of the first bail application, we were in the prosecutor's office. Nothing was said about opposing bail. It was simple that anyone could have processed it. We go into court, prosecution stands up, they're opposing bail, and they give us what they allege was a quick affidavit because of alleged non-disclosure, documentation of probably 100 pages plus opposing Angelo's bail on the allegations that he's a flight risk. And then the magistrate over and above that is like, okay, no problem, you guys can go reply. And we were running around the courtroom with the laptops trying to find somewhere to print, preparing, answering papers to this thing we never expected. And they always say, go to court prepared for the unexpected. But when you have a deal and a handshake deal and words, you know, the ethics of a prosecutor, you're as good as your word. And when they tell us they're not opposing bail, and when court actually starts to decide they're opposing bail, we really did not expect that. And it took us all by surprise, especially Angelo. Over and above that, I think most of South Africa saw is that when Angelo came into court, he wasn't himself. He was with his portable oxygen. He could barely stand, which is very different and a stark contrast to the man you've seen testifying at the Zondo Commission. And for him to get the shock of being denied bail and being told you're a liar, we worried that you're going to escape after being here for 2 years and putting everything on the line to help unearth corruption, it was a huge shock on the man.
And Danny, if I may ask you, so all this backroom work had been done, you expected that bail would be quite easily granted, and yet I'm sure the idea which prosecutor put up what looks to an ordinary member of the public like me and a journalist, quite compelling evidence that Mr. and Mrs. Agrizzi had assembled a tidy nest egg. And that they are, I know that Angelo clearly from the book is of Italian descent, and that they thought he may fly the coop, that it might very well be his plan to go before things get really tough. can you categorically say that that wasn't the intention? And could you explain what are these divisions in the ID and the NPA that are now quite clear from what you've told us?
I can definitely categorically state that Angelo at no stage, and assuming you tell your lawyer everything, never intended to fly the coop. It's since the beginning, even against some advice where we said, Angelo, just hold back a little bit. He was determined to unearth everything, whether it be at SARS inquiries, whether it be at state capture, whether it be in the NPA. He said, he has always maintained, I will see this thing through to the end, no matter what that end may be. So it was never an indication that he was sitting in the background moving assets. As we explained to the court, these were offshore investments, which any South African with means or middle class, upper class is entitled to do. It was all done legally. It was done through the South African Reserve Bank with approval. He declared it to SARS. He paid his taxes, which I know most of our current senior politicians don't believe in doing when they move their money offshore. But Angelo's done everything legally. And for them to come and say, all of a sudden, we believe he's a flight risk, when he's one of the only individuals, for whatever his reasons are, that's been completely open with the prosecution, with the state capture investigators, for them to turn around and say, all of a sudden, 2 years later, we believe you're making this grand plan to escape. It just doesn't make sense. And that's what we couldn't understand. And we said to them, we've been in discussions with you for 2 years. Surely at some stage where you believe that this man intends to flee, don't you call us in and say, listen, this has come to our attention. We don't want to have to revoke his bail or oppose his bail, because remember, he was on bail at the time in the other case.
Yes.
They could have revoked it at any stage, but they chose to ambush us at court for whatever their reasons are. We still to date do not know what their reasons are, because even when we launched the appeal, which last Friday, as you saw, we were successful, they never opposed it. They never opposed our appeal. They never said, we're going to fight this to the end. And they just essentially said, okay, well, you disclose everything to us and give some sort of security, and we've got no problem. Why this couldn't have been done before, I don't know.
Got it. So quite late in the book, Frank Dutton makes an appearance. Now, Mr. Frank Dutton is a very famous, world-famous South African prosecutor. He's been at the ICC, working alongside Shamila Batoy for almost a decade now. And from the book, it's clear that he's back now. I knew he was back. I didn't know they're working that closely together. So he calls up Angelo Agrizzi after he gives his Zondo Commission testimony and says, I'd like to chat. Tell us about that.
I have great respect for Frank Dutton.
Yes.
I hadn't worked with him in the past. I've only worked with him in the State Capture Commission, and he's one of the senior investigators on the matter. And he really is one. If you need anyone on your case, Frank is thorough and pedantic, and he's just got this calm touch that just assists with every aspect of the matter that you're dealing with. So Frank and Angelo struck up a relationship, a professional relationship, should I say, when Angelo decided to go to state capture. And every part of the way, whatever evidence or testimony Angelo's given, whatever documents he's given, Frank has called him up and he has attempted to verify or checked every piece of information Angelo has given. It's proven to be correct subsequently, which is quite amazing, which a lot of people forgot when there was this aura of Angelo is a liar and didn't disclose, which is nonsense. But Frank at every stage has been available to us in terms of testing information, testing documentation, verifying facts. For example, when Angelo gave testimony against the Minister Mokonyane about the party at the guest house,
yes,
Frank physically went and checked at the guest house. He looked at registers. He saw when this party was. He checks the affidavits. He says, listen, I'm not really happy about this. Can you provide more information here so I can close this gap? Unbelievable investigator to work with.
So he's been working quite closely with Angelo Agrizzi on this. Do you think that it'll be possible to strike a plea bargain? Because eventually, I guess that testimony, and we already see Vincent Smith's in court, you can see that the pace of those criminal prosecutions are really picking up now. And I think it's great. It's made the country feel like finally something's happening. Angelo Agrizzi likely to go to court. Do you think that, are you in negotiations for plea bargain negotiations in order for him to give that testimony?
So negotiations haven't started. We've asked not for a plea bargain. We've asked to meet with the senior members of the NPA, not to discuss a plea bargain, just to discuss how they see this case going. And the interesting thing from the beginning, when Angelo decided to go to state capture, when he decided to open to the NPA, SARS, etc., at no stage did he say, I will only do this on the promise of a plea bargain, or I will only do this if I get immunity. Angelo has taken this head on, all the risk to himself, his family, his livelihood, etc. And regardless whether there's a plea bargain or not, Angelo said, I will see this through to the end. Look, obviously it's something we hope to discuss with them, but I do believe in both the criminal cases, Angelo does have a strong case. We're not too convinced about the state's case at this stage from what we've seen, and we will fight it because Angelo is not guilty of the offenses they're accusing him of. But whether there's a plea bargain or not, we sit in with bated breath waiting for the state to discuss same with us if that's an opportunity for him.
Thank you, Danny. So the book, I mean, I sat in and I listened to all the testimony. I've read Adrian Basson's book. I'm still to read James Brent Stein's book. Many people have written about Bosasa. But still, the things that this book tells you made me draw my breath, like how the money was put into Cedric Froelic's pocket. There's first Vincent Smith being like a straight up guy, and that's how many of us know him. He was very good at Scopa. He was really like a politician who you thought this guy's incorruptible, great at his job. And then in the book, Angelo presents the scene of Gavin Watson, Vincent Smith, a couple of others sitting at a Santon hotel, chatting like old buddies. And in that, he tells us he was getting a 40,000 retainer. And now we know his daughter's university fees were paid. She got a runaround, etc. And of course, that's going to be the emblematic first big political trial. Were you surprised at the things you learned as you began to lead your client through this coming clean? I mean, after this, I'd like to chat with you a little bit about what his motivations may have been, because you obviously are friends and lawyers, huh? and you're his lawyer.
Yes, it's quite crazy. It's reading the book. We've been living this from all the evidence and going through it with Angelo, and then reading it all succinctly in the book, which we've heard these stories before, but to read it again, it's quite mind-blowing. I remember last year before COVID and lockdown, Angelo and myself had a meeting with the SIU investigators, and they were talking about just the Johannesburg portion of the corruption to do with Bosasa, now African Global. And the money they were talking in terms of change of hands and corruption was in the billions. My mouth dropped to the floor because I thought 40,000 Rand here, a car there, a house for someone's daughter, university fees for this one's daughter. It adds up, and the money is absolutely frightening. And to hear all the stories and read all the stories behind it, I mean, most people would have read in the Sunday Times the portion of when Andres van Tonda, Angelo, and the late Gavin Watson were in Rome together. It was in Rome. And
yes,
best hotels, the best tours, the best food. And in the meantime, in the background, they're getting this highly confidential SIU report about an investigation into them. So their reach was, again, until I met Angelo, I had no idea of Bosasa, African Global. No, I never knew this company existed. And to see the extent that this company had in South Africa with tenders, with Lindelo, Home Affairs, the prisons, it's absolutely frightening to think of the money that has changed hands in corruption, that has been sieved out of this country that should be going to taxpayers. It's mind-blowing.
So at some point in the book, I mean, from the start, this is a corrupt enterprise. It starts with Gavin Watson, one of the famous four Watson brothers, the Watson family from Port Elizabeth. He pays off union members in order to get catering contracts on the mind. So it has like rottenness and influence peddling baked into it. That's like Bosasa, that was part of its founding story. Do you think that Angelo was part of that from the start? Because what's undeniable in reading it is that he's a talented executive. He's a great ops guy. They built up what seemed to be a good company. But in my head all day today, as I finished the book, I was thinking to myself, Danny, it's like, how do you square this? Like, if corruption is baked into the company, can you still say it was a good company and he was a good executive? How do you understand this black and white, these binaries? Huh?
I won't spoil too much in the book. I think people
Yes.
must definitely read it. But if you look at Angelo's history, he's always been a fantastic businessman, a fantastic ops guy. And I think that's what caught the late Gavin Watson's eye. The late Gavin Watson, I'll just say Gavin Watson, he had this reach into the catering contracts. But in terms of his operations, he was always behind the scenes. And I think the way Angelo ran companies and businesses caught his eye. And after that, he realized he needed this guy to actually run the operations, because to an extent, yes, and again, it's alleged corruption because nothing's been proven in court yet. To an extent, you still need someone to operate this company and perform certain duties, regardless of how you get the tenders. And Angelo, I think, was amazing at that. In terms of Angelo being involved in the corruption, what's quite amazing, if you look at everything, it was this, for lack of a better term, a cult. Everyone was surrounding Gavin Watson, this icon, this brilliant businessman who had all these contracts and all these connections and could pick up a phone and open a door to our erstwhile president, amongst other people. And I think people it got to a point where Gavin would say, I've secured this tender, I've secured this business, I need you to go talk to this person, give him this envelope, don't worry about what it's for, and we'll deal with the rest. And it just got so intertwined in everyday business. When you say yes, I believe Bosasa was born corrupt in terms of how they got their tenders, and it just became an everyday part of business, whether you knew you were doing it or not. It was just an instruction from the head honcho, go do this, and you went and did it like a good worker ant.
I also don't want to give away too much of the book because it really is a page turner, but just some of the numbers which have been out there. So Jacob Zuma's foundation gets 300,000 Rand a month. Tom Moyani, one stage the Correctional Services Commissioner, later our SARS Tax Commissioner, and I have to say I'm happy for not very long, 700,000 Rand a month. There's these monthly amounts going to everybody, and there was that famous scene at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry of Gavin Watson counting this money. So they were extremely close, Gavin Watson, Angelo Agrizzi. Maybe not blood brothers because they obviously had differences between them, probably two A-type personalities rubbing up against each other. But what does Angelo think now? I mean, what does he think about what happened to Gavin Watson, who of course died in that accident, or we don't know if it was an assisted suicide, if he crashed it, whatever happened. What's his view of what happened?
It's difficult to pinpoint it because, again, you know, we weren't at the accident scene, we weren't at the funeral. Not by any means saying that it didn't happen, but there are a lot of strange factors behind it that we are still trying to put our heads around. I have no doubt that unfortunately the man has passed, and unfortunately South Africa won't get to hear his side of the story, and we won't get to put questions to him. But, you know, Angelo's focused on himself and his mission at the moment. So a lot of it is obviously intertwined with Gavin Watson, but there's no point for us at this stage, especially Angelo, to say, I wonder if it's true, I wonder what happened. It doesn't really take Angelo's case any further while he fights his own battles.
Yes, of course. In the book, it's clear that he has seen pictures of the accident. He's done forensics work on it because because of the work he did on the mines, because of the contracts he had at Lindela, because of his work at the airports company. He's good at security. So he's looked at that footage, etc. And some of his assessment of it I found quite compelling and interesting. to read. So I would recommend that to people. What I do want to ask you about, Danny, is what was Angelo's motivation? What took him to this point? So from Jared Watson and the others, the Watson family, they say that he was motivated by vengeance, that he didn't get the walkaway money that he asked for, and that spilling the beans isn't really a moral act. It was an act of vengeance, an act of anger. What's your view of his motivation as someone who knows him quite well?
So we've spoken intensely about this, and I've questioned Angelo on this on more occasions than I can count. But he always said to me, and he still does say to me, he says there were a few occasions. The net wasn't closing in, the walls weren't closing in. Angelo just decided it's enough. He can see what's going on here. He can see the trajectory that South Africa's on, and he knows where he wants it to be. You know, our current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, talks about the new dawn. Angelo was a big believer in that, in whether it was just for his little world or the entirety of South Africa. And he kept going to the Watsons and to Gavin and saying, it's enough. We need to stop this. I'm not saying you guys have to go hand yourselves in, but it's just enough. We need to run clean businesses and do this cleanly. And then Angelo, he speaks about it in the book. He had that serious health scare where he had the heart attack.
Yes, on Christmas Day, I think.
Christmas Day, where, I mean, he was in fact declared dead for a few minutes until they resuscitated him. And he says to me, and you read it in the book, where Gavin came to the hospital room where he had just been brought back from the dead, and he asked Angelo to sign papers for Gavin to be a beneficiary of money on his life policy. And whether it was that or a build-up, it just clicked in Angelo's head, and he says, I'm not doing this anymore. And before speaking, he tried to get the whole company to turn a new leaf, to come clean, to separate the businesses, run clean operations, and the Watsons and the people surrounding them said absolutely not. And Angelo got to a point where the erstwhile President Zuma set up the State Capture Commission, or he spoke about it, and Angelo said, that's the route I'm going to have to go, because the people need to know about this and need to know about Bosasa. So definitely, I don't believe revenge was a motivation. He's not a vengeful man. I mean, I promise you, Angelo, when the late Gavin Watson passed, Angelo was definitely not dancing in the streets, despite what people think. He was taken aback by most of South Africa. This was someone who he had lived with for most of his life, who he had worked with, who he considered a brother. As you said, blood brothers earlier. But it's definitely not revenge, I can tell you that. And you can read it from the book. It's something more than that. And I hope that more whistleblowers take a page from Angelo's book, whether you're complicit in corruption, you're a witness to corruption, or you believe something may happen. I really hope people take some sort of courage that Angelo has, just to step forward and hopefully improve this country.
I have questions for you. I just want to welcome people who've joined us. I'm just going to say some hello, Lisa Loeb, hello, Dennis Higgs, T.E. Mkuchani, Roger Ferguson, Tracy Jackson, Pat Berman, Nikki Jules, Spencer, Eric Oosthuizen, Janice Leibovitz, and everybody else, Pumla Gola, everyone who's with us, you're very welcome to ask questions in the chat. We'd love to take them. So you were saying he wanted to blow the whistle, Danny. If I wanted to blow the whistle and I saw that somebody who had done so told us everything, told us about corruption at the highest level, down to the lower level, down to MPs, into the party, where Bosasa paid regularly for ANC gatherings, in fact hosted election counting at its campus on the West Rand. Now he's facing 2 cases. He almost didn't get bail. He was jailed and then had to be hospitalized, and now, from what you say, is very ill. What kind of message does that send to whistleblowers, where you think that you have a deal and then actually you just get arrested? Is it, what do you think about that? Yeah?
It's crazy. And I also think that when the prosecutors and the magistrate considered denying and eventually decided to deny Angelo bail, I don't believe that they considered the current climate of protecting whistleblowers and the good that whistleblowers do in this country. Because when it comes to bail, remember, it's not a trial on the merits of the case, whether someone did or didn't do what you're alleging they did. you need to look at all the repercussions of that denying someone their liberty will have. And it sent a really bad message to other current whistleblowers, potential whistleblowers, please, hopefully future whistleblowers, to say that come forward, talk about corruption. We're not going to arrest, or we might arrest a few of the people that are involved in this, but you're going to get the worst of it. But in terms of people that could happen to, you can't get stronger than Angelo, and he will come out of this stronger. I have absolutely no doubt. And I know if he could speak tonight, he would be telling people, do not be deterred by this. You have to continue against this storm, against this hailstorm, and just push and push and push no matter what, just to hopefully let South Africa see this new dawn. Because this is part of it, unfortunately. This is when you come out as a whistleblower or any aspect of that, there's always going to be pushback, no matter what. And Angelo knew that. So to say that he gave evidence or gave testimony thinking that, okay, well, as long as I'm speaking out, nothing will happen to me, it's definitely not the case. Angelo knew there would be repercussions. Unfortunately, he's facing severe repercussions, but it definitely hasn't deterred him. And I'm sure he would tell people, don't let it deter you either. Because
thank you. I'm going to ask, sorry, Danny. No, you carry on.
We've had 12, 13 years and longer of people not speaking out out against corruption, and it hasn't got us anywhere.
Thank you very much. Melinda Ferguson, will you turn on your camera? This is our Uber publisher.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
Hi, Mel.
Hello.
Could you tell us about when you decided to publish this book and what the process was like?
I'll be honest with you. Angelo Agrizzi got hold of me in March. I saw his name and ignored his mail. I was actually I felt very negative towards Angelo Agrizzi. I'd heard the Bosasa K-word tape played at Zondo. I mean, not Bosasa, at the Zondo Commission. And I was actually a bit repulsed by him, to be honest. Didn't really want to give him the time of day. COVID had just happened. I got another mail. I said, I'm busy. I mean, I can't believe that I did that to him now when I actually think about what he was trying to give me. And then his ghostwriter, Philippa Mitchell, who worked very closely with Angelo on the book, she emailed me and said she had sent it to Jonathan Ball. And that's it. You know, if you do that to a publisher, you tell a publisher that someone else has got the book. I thought, let me look at it. And I read it that weekend, and I did a Zoom meeting with Angelo and Philippa, and I said, I want to do this book. I need to do this book. I just could feel how important this book was. And I'm really thrilled that Angelo's been able to hold this book in ICU. He's got it. He's had it on his chest. And for me, that's almost made this whole thing worthwhile, is that Angelo has his book.
Good. Question, you can take this one, Mel. I'll read it to you. It's from Nikki Jules. Question, to what extent does Angelo in this book own up to his own wrongdoing? While Danny has a glowing view of him, which is understandable, Angelo was no saint, is no saint. He is a self-confessed racist and a very complex character. To what extent does he own this in the book?
You know, I felt that initially when I read the first draft of the book, I felt that I needed to push Angelo a bit on that. I think that Angelo did things for very good reasons. I do believe, like Danny does, that he wanted to do the honest and the right thing. But I think that along the process of working on the book, Angelo himself had insights maybe that he had not had before, and that the motivation for money and material, we can't get away from that. Bosasa was a cash cow for so many people, including Angelo, including, of course, Gavin, including many people in the ANC. And I think that it's been a process of awakening, that Angelo's had to also look at the dark shadow of himself, the belly, the beast within himself, the shadow self, that he has had to look at what drove him, because we cannot get away from the fact that people in Bosasa were benefiting. We're driving beautiful cars. We're buying villas in Italy. You know, those kinds of things were the payoff from being in this company.
Danny, do you also, I mean, to answer Nikki's question, do you think that there is genuine contrition and owning up? And so what does that look like in practice? Going before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, what else might it entail? Or do you think just saying your truth, putting it out there now in a book is sufficient?
So putting himself out there in the book is not, this is probably the last thing that Angelo's done. He's, for example, Nikki Jules mentioned the self-confessed racist. This was a trying time for Angelo. He came out, he owned it. We went before the South African Human Rights Commission. We discussed it with them. Angelo took his punishment, whether people think it's enough punishment or not enough punishment. Unfortunately, in South Africa, it's rough, but Angelo owned up to it, and he's undertaken it. It wasn't a matter where he said, okay, I'm going to take the guilt, I'm going to pay a fine, and that's the end of it. Angelo went and did more than that. Firstly, he publicly apologized. And secondly, he's been working with charitable organizations in Alexandria, in the townships. Still today, even without us knowing, Angelo will say to us, sorry, he can't meet today to discuss the matters because he's in Alex working with some high profile ex-ANC guys, a lot of individuals that were part of the struggle. And he's been working with them both to rehabilitate himself and hopefully make a difference in South Africa, which I believe he's doing. And he goes in there, he's not just sitting and doing EFTs from his computer, he's going and rolling up his sleeves and working in the townships with underprivileged youth, elderly, and trying to make a difference in their lives. So whether people think that's enough, I don't think Angelo's looking to prove anything to anyone. I think that is purely for himself, which I admire. He owned up to his wrongdoing and he's trying to make a difference, whether people have been slandering him, saying you're still a racist. I had an interview at the SABC the other day. They still say he's a racist. And he says, you know what, you can call me what you want, but I'm still going to go try do good and try.
Yes, people are very angry with him. When he wasn't given bail, I saw on social media, a lot of the commentary was good, deserve it, go to jail. Melinda, if I may come to you, you publish beautiful books with compelling characters. And so I thought I wouldn't give too much away. But at the beginning, Angelo writes about his early life. He wasn't born rich. He was born in Germiston. He left school very early. He put himself into chef's school, and along the way he worked to pay for that. So at the Greek cafe he worked at, the owner, he taught him a trick that if you keep a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk there, as you serve people, you ring that up, and inevitably people will say, ah, no, leave it, I'll take it. Or at the lobster restaurant, where he was chefing and also waiting, he'd walk around with, I think, Jimmy the Lobster. Was that the name, Mel? I can't remember now.
Yes.
With the lobster, and pretend to people like he was selling lobster, fresh lobster, but in fact, he was taking the frozen stuff out of the freezer. Do you think that this is how business is done in South Africa? Or was he just like, was he always going to do dark things in his business life, Melinda, as you began to know Angelo Agrizzi?
I don't think Angelo was always going to do dark things. I think he had a cleverness. I mean, listen, I'm a recovering addict, so I kind of I understand that kind of the thing that people do, the kind of manipulations that we do as human beings to get what we want. I think Angelo was a really an astute and very clever businessman, and maybe had a few tricks. But I think meeting Gavin Watson, literally, I've often thought that I think Gavin had such an influence on Angelo that Angelo wanted to do good. Angelo's one of those people, he doesn't want to let people down. Even lying on a respirator in the hospital, he sends me messages. He doesn't want to let me down, that he isn't at the Zoom tonight. So I think that his generosity and the Italian spirit in Angelo, he was almost a perfect foil for Gavin Watson to take and to use that kind of big character, the generosity, the ability to think on his feet. And unfortunately, I think he got locked into this relationship with someone like Gavin Watson, who had a lot of power over him, I think. And he was doing a lot of stuff in a way to please his master. That's my take on Angelo. For a lot of his Bosasa work, for almost 2 decades, I think he got joy out of making Gavin happy.
I wonder if I could ask you to read a little bit. I've chosen some spots for us. But just the detail of the bribe paying was, for me, fascinating, because we don't get that in the other state capture books. We obviously know our money went missing, but here's the detail of how that happened. So on 204, they go along to meet a senior correctional services official. Will you read for us, Mel?
I will. I'll never forget one particular bribe handover meeting that Gavin and I had with a senior DCS official. We were sitting opposite him at the Michelangelo Hotel, having breakfast. Gavin had the cash in his briefcase, but had forgotten to bring along an envelope. So he decided to put the money inside a newspaper and pass it across the table. The guy opened the newspaper as it was handed over, and the money fluttered out all over the floor. There must have been 100,000 rand scattered everywhere, some of it loose and some of it in packs. It was quite a sight, the three of us scrambling to pick it all up before anybody noticed.
Thank you. So, Melinda, you've done an unusual thing in this book. There are QR codes dotted all over it. When I put my phone over that, what am I going to see and hear? And what were you and Angelo trying to accomplish with that?
This really was Angelo's brainchild. He always said to me, we need to have the QR codes. We need to have the QR codes. And what's amazing is you can open certain places in the book, put your phone, have a QR scan reader, or most smartphones actually do it instinctively. And you can get a video experience of the book. So you've got Gavin Watson shouting at people at a Bosasa meeting. You've got Gavin counting the money in the safe. There are all sorts of ways to make it an almost interactive kind of 3D experience. It's like a movie. It's like a little bit of a documentary that happens with the book.
So I asked this to Danny before, but I'd love to hear your version. Is it a tell-all? Is it a confessional? Or is it a revenge novella?
I think it is a confession. It is like an extended affidavit. I don't think it's a story. I think Angelo was awakened to come and tell the truth. I don't agree completely with Danny. I think that there was a part of him that was going to try and save his ass. I do think so. I mean, I think whistleblowers come to a point where their heads are against the wall and they see the writing and the writing looks bad. And I personally think there was a part of Angelo that must have thought, I have a chance if I tell the truth that maybe I can be treated in a better way than what it's going to look like if I don't. But I do believe he's a Catholic. I do know that he's a Catholic. And I do believe that he was also awakened by a conscience that said, I need to set myself free. The truth will set me free.
Well, let's go to some of that on page 239, if you could, and read for us. Thank you.
As the holiday drew to a close and reality began to set in, I decided to write an email to Brian. Dan, I never know how to pronounce Bibuk. How do you Brian's name?
Bibak.
Okay.
Bibak.
I wanted to establish the best possible ways to come clean and rid myself of this burden I was carrying. My request, which was largely for advice, was gently weighted with a glimmer of hope that there was some kind of life beyond the Watsons. With the NPA, I knew that speaking out would have far-reaching consequences. Gavin never signed anything. How would anyone believe that anything I was telling them, as fantastical as it sounded, was even true? I weighed up my options and interrogated each new idea. With the NPA seemingly captured by the very person I was incriminating, to whom was I to confess? I couldn't help but wonder whether risking it all to expose Gavin Watson might mean that my next meal would either be coming to me from behind bars or via a feeding tube.
I chose that because of what we know now. Danny, if I can come back to you. When you read the book for possible defamation charges, how did you mitigate against that risk? And do you think that there are chances of people bringing charges against the book? Because, like you said, I don't want to give it away, but there is great detail. These are actually Angelo Agrizzi's files in here. And if you scan the QR codes, that's even more of them.
So it was a bit tactical by Angelo, actually, because to date, no one's brought any defamation claims against him. One or two politicians have threatened, but they haven't brought any defamation claims against him yet, despite all his testimony. So yes, the book goes into great detail, but it's nothing he hasn't already said at state capture or in a SARS inquiry. It's nothing people, the people that he implicates don't know that he's implicating them in already. So it goes into great detail. But the thing is, if people want to bring a defamation claim, and we did go, and I did, pedantic, I circled and highlighted a couple of things and said, Angelo, you really want to say this? He's like, just go for it. And he knows the risk. But if people bring, or whoever it may be, brings a defamation claim against him, they then have to open up themselves or their selves into, they open Pandora's box, essentially. So Angelo's saying, listen, I've got evidence to back all of this up. Again, one of the defenses to defamation is if it's the truth, Angelo believes, and it's most of it, I'd say all of it, in fact, by state capture has been proven to be true. So he's not worried. He says, if people bring defamation claims, I've got evidence to back all of my claims up.
And I wonder if you could just give me, as we begin to round up, some insight into Debbie Agrizzi, because at the end, Angelo Agrizzi acknowledges her as being the driving force, not only behind the book, but behind him as well, keeps their family together through very difficult times. Could you share with me a bit of her character?
Sure, and I'm sure Melinda can as well. But I've only, my main interaction with Debbie, I've always obviously been interacting with Angelo, but recently when Angelo couldn't speak, Debbie and I have had many a conversation. And as the saying goes, behind every great man is an even greater woman. And really that is Debbie in a nutshell. She's been the rock holding that family together through all of this. Not once has she said, I don't know why he's doing this. I'm so angry at Angelo for doing this. She's backed him in everything and probably given him a little smack on the side of the head just to steer him in the right direction. She's an amazing woman, and she really is the glue that holds all of that entire family together. So it's been really enjoyable working with her. It's been a strenuous time for her, but at no point, especially when it was really bad, when Angelo was unconscious, when he fainted at the prison, at no point did I see her break, which is quite amazing. At no point did she say, my husband's going to die. At every stage, she said, he's going to pull through this. I know, Angelo, I'm not worried, which is quite amazing.
Been married for a long time. And Danny, if I can just ask you a final question, and if you could wrap some thoughts into that. I was astounded by the rottenness of the NPA that is again clear from this. It came out at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, and we know. So Shamila Batoy has got a hell of a job to clean up that place. Were you surprised by the kind of detail of how Bosasa could just get cases dropped down the priority list, how they could get cases perhaps scotched? Do you think the cleanup is beginning to take effect?
I definitely think the cleanup is taking effect, and Advocate Batoy is also, she's an amazing professional, amazing woman. She served on some of in the highest positions, and for her to come back and start the cleanup here, I mean, people can see it. I can see it in my everyday practice in the courts. Slow implementation, things starting to work, gears starting to turn, prosecutors falling in line. So I'm hoping it carries on, because I do believe that over and above education and health, our justice system is the bedrock that's going to take this country forward. And I do think she's the woman that can lead it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your thoughts this evening. Mel, if I may come to you for that final reading. So first I want to ask you, Melinda, is that Adrian Basson, who wrote the Bosasa book and has been covering the story for 15 years, so doggedly. There's a grudging respect for him from Angelo in the book. Could you share that with us?
Sure, it would be wonderful to have Adrian on this webinar as well, for him to give some thoughts about Angelo. I think Angelo really respected Adrian in terms of that he was the one guy who doggedly went for Bosasa to unravel. Adrian was the guy that people were, I think, at Bosasa most scared of, and Angelo, I think he's got more than a grudging respect. I think he's actually got a deep respect for Adrian Basson. I also think he's a bit scared of Adrian in terms of the way that Adrian's in a way unpacked Bosasa. But I think if anything, Angelo, I let Adrian read the manuscript in early days. And Angelo spent a lot of time saying, what did Adrian think? What did Adrian think? So in some way, I also think that Angelo might have wanted to do this to also make peace with someone like Adrian, to say, look, I'm not just a criminal who didn't care. I wanted to actually redeem myself as well for people like Adrian Basson, who had been the prince of uncovering the whole dirty thing.
There's a point in the book where he takes Adrian on this 4-hour tour, trying to convince him that Bosasa is a fine company. At the end, he says to this young man, who, so what did you think? And he said, oh, very impressive, but I'm still going to uncover everything you're doing. And he does through the years. We really have a great debt of gratitude to him. So, Mel, if I could ask you to read our final bit here on page 309. Huh?
All right.
About whistleblowers. If you could start at our arrests.
Okay. Our arrests were all over the news. The Hawks had used the SIU's 2010 charge sheet. Everyone had been arrested, except, of course, Gavin Watson, whose name appeared nowhere. My family was freaking out, thinking I was going to spend the night in jail, but I was already on my way home, having been released on 20,000 Rand bail. Driving back, I couldn't help but wonder how many other potential whistleblowers changed their minds after hearing our stories at the state capture inquiry and then seeing us being arrested afterwards.
Thank you very much. And there's a scan to see the whistleblowers being arrested. Congratulations on a book that I think firmly belongs on that shelf of state capture books, because this really does take us into the belly of the beast. And as usual, it's very compellingly written and edited. So we hand you back. Thank you very much, Danny. We hand you back to Benjamin Trisk to say goodbye to everybody. Thanks, Benji. Are you there?
I'm here, Ferial, and thank you very much for participating, and you, Danny, for speaking as openly and as honestly as you have. I do think it is an important book. I had coffee with Angelo about 2 months ago, and I said to him, I have a distinct feeling that this is not your whole story, because when you look at some of the fleeting references to people who have been shown to be so utterly corrupt, you can't believe that can be the last word. So I think that perhaps there's another book. I hope there is. And I hope that there are people watching tonight who are involved in this whole process and who will take heart that it's being aired in the way it is. Thank you, Melinda. You've done a wonderful job. Ferial, as I said, when I grow older, I want to be just like you.
You're very kind. Thank you, Benji.
And Danny, thank you. We'll put you on the side of the honest people only yet. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you,
TNA. Thank you, Benjamin.